Obesity doesn't cause disease. The food you eat gets you fat, and it also gets you sick because you're basically eating sugar and the plant chemicals and antigens and the fermentation that actually is the cause of almost all disease. That's why fatty meat, salt water is like the most amazing elimination diet you can do.
Welcome back to Decentralized Radio, your one-stop shop for education on how you can take back control of your health and your wealth and live outside of the centralized systems that are plaguing our society. We're hosting industry experts every Tuesday live and also releasing podcasts Friday morning.
All right. Hello. Welcome back to another episode of Decentralized Radio. It's your boy, Ryan. Tristanless, once again, he has abandoned me, sort of like when the father went to go buy cigarettes when I was 12 years old. That is a made-up story, folks. I have a loving father. But we're joined today with quite the guest, Dr. Robert Kiltz. How you doing, Robert?
I am very good. Thank you, Ryan, for inviting me. I really appreciate this time to have a conversation about anything.
It's interesting because we were just talking a little bit pre-show about how I found you on TikTok. There's a lot of really cool people in the animal-based space, but everyone has an interesting story to how they found that way of eating, that community. And it's not a stereotypical linear line to reaching there, especially if you come from an MD background. I'd love to hear just sort of your story of how you've come to be where you are now as an OB, because that also makes for an interesting conversation too later on.
Well, I'm an OB/GYN and
Correct.
a reproductive endocrinologist. I mean, my specialty is fertility care. That's my primary job. I own and run CNY Fertility centers around the country. And we're one of the largest, but we specialize in integrating Eastern Western medicine. We're most affordable in America, I believe. We do a lot of meditation, yoga, acupuncture, massage, and we do a lot of standard stuff, IVF surgeries, all of those things. But I began to integrate nutrition probably about 20 years ago because some of my patients were doing something called the paleo diet. And I had no idea what that was. I'm a standard American, born and raised in Los Angeles, kicked out of school in a gang, couldn't read, father in jail. That's my elevator speech. But I just a standard kid in the sense of what I ate, Italian background, Mediterranean. I went to medical school. I thought, wow, I love science. I love math. And we had the answers in science. And then as I went through many things to get to finally practicing what I do. I came upon the fact that many people couldn't get pregnant with the standard stuff we knew. So I thought, well, let's begin to bring in some mindfulness and meditation, and maybe we can help people de-stress, continue on the process, because if they can continue, it might happen naturally. And many people getting pregnant on this paleo diet, maybe about 15, 20 years ago, I had no idea what it was. I did Atkins, Weight Watchers. I was a massive exerciser and runner, but I had arthritis, psoriasis, bowel bleeding, kidney stones, and migraines. So when I started reading about this paleo diet, I was fascinated by a high-fat, lower carbohydrate diet. And I started doing it personally, and I started feeling better. And then I went through the keto phase, and about almost 15 years ago, I ran into this guy doing carnivore. He was ripped, felt great, didn't exercise, and I said, bingo, I love meat anyway. So I went on what I call the baby's diet: bacon, eggs, butter, beef, salt. Now, there's an ice cream in there too that you got to make. But I started doing it personally. That's when everything went away in 1 month. No more bowel bleeding, no more hemorrhoids, no more kidney stones, no more migraines. And my energy, I mean, I always had pretty good energy. It went through the roof. And my ability to focus even got better than ever. And I've been talking keto and carnivore in the fertility space because I'm seeing so many people that suddenly getting pregnant. Naturally, for one, improving their ability to conceive with either IUI or IVF or whatever the other modalities we're utilizing. And so I've taken the Kool-Aid straightforward that I believe that a plant-based diet is the cause of almost all of our diseases, and infertility is just another disease.
You know, that's such a good point, and it sort of reminds me of a story of my own, where when I was, man, I think it was 25, so about 3.5 years ago, I was diagnosed with hypogonadism. And at the time, it wasn't entirely shocking. If you sort of know my background as an audience, I had anorexia background years before that, and just probably crashed hormones for years and just not knowing what was going on, energy issues, joint pain, all of these things that you supposedly in sort of the stereotypical space when you weight restore is supposed to come back. But it just isn't that simple, especially when the standard of care for eating disorders is like literally eat everything under the sun. If it's labeled as a food, you have to eat it or it's an eating disorder now.
Yeah,
So
right,
it's a
right,
whole thing.
right.
But what's so fascinating about that diagnosis at the time was, while it wasn't shocking to me, I went to the gym one day and I was talking to the guy that owned my local gym, and he's not much older than me, maybe like early 30s, really jacked. And I was talking to him about this diagnosis. I was like, yeah, it's a bummer. They're telling me I'm going to have to be on T. I'm going to try and find a natural way out of this because I just know it's not where I want to be. And he was like, you know, that happened to me when I was 19 and I've been on T ever since. And what the strange part was as I had these conversations with more and more people, how unsurprised they were that a younger person was having this. And this sort of normalization of hormonal issues becoming more commonplace in younger and younger age groups. And it's what you're seeing with fertility is we're looking at sperm counts dropping by half in the last century, and then double so in the last 20 years.
Well, infertility is on the rise. PMS, PCOS, male and female libido issues are dropping, and it's secondary. What I believe is a plant-based, low animal fat diet. I mean, plants are the predators and we are the prey, and we're so believing the stories that plants are so good for you, but plants make you weak and meek, and they go after your reproductive system because plants do not want you to reproduce. They are smarter than you and I. They have immense energy systems and communication systems that they know how to control you and me. And because they're highly addictive, again, they're live organisms that don't want to be eaten either. And so the simplicity is estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone are made by plants. Anti-estrogenic progesterone and testosterone chemicals are made by plants, along with chemicals and antigens and other products that actually attack your thyroid gland, your kidneys, your brain. Every organ system of our body is simply attacked by the inappropriate human diet.
Are you self-employed or a small business owner and are tired of paying hundreds of dollars a month to centralized health insurance companies for minimal coverage because there is no alternative? Well, I have good news for you. There is. And this podcast is brought to you by Crowd Health. Crowd Health is a more decentralized alternative to health insurance, and it uses community and crowdfunding to help its members pay for emergencies when they do happen. They incentivize and prioritize health and personal responsibility and share the thought that you should really only be using the centralized healthcare system when emergencies do happen. This is what I am on board with, and I have personally signed up for Crowd Health since I left the corporate engineering world and the medical benefits that come with it. If you want to learn more, you can check out our episode with CEO and founder Andy Schoonover, or you can head over to joincrowdhealth.com and use code DRADIO, DRADIO, when you sign up to get a discounted rate of only $99 for the first 3 months. Centralized healthcare is one of the biggest issues in our society today, and I really love what Crowd Health is doing to provide an alternative for people who care.
One thing I wanted to sort of pick your brain about is there's a segment here where people become overwhelmed. Like you mentioned, all these drastic symptoms that are seemingly all over the map, from joints to, when I was going through this, it was like hypogonadism, it was joint pain, it was hypothyroidism, all these things. And so it can become overwhelming. And where we make the mistake is we start looking at these individual systems as individual problems. And sort of like what you're saying is like, we need to find this systematic problem, and that's like in your case, and what we're talking about here is within plant chemicals and defense chemicals. I've spoken with Sally Norton many times about oxalates, for just as an example, as a pretty nasty one. But maybe you could kind of break down a little more of just sort of the culture, because I think part of the battle that you and I face is not so much getting, once we get people in the door, I think it makes sense. It's pretty simple. It's sort of opening that door for people and keeping it open that can be difficult, because there's so much talk around simply health being a input, output, calories in, calories out. I'm going to eat lettuce because there's 0 calories, blah, blah, blah mentality. How do we break that paradigm for people?
Well, obesity causes no disease. Being fat or skinny isn't the cause or the protector either. Having too much fat on your body will make you reproductively inactive. So fat turns out to be the most important thing that you should eat and carry on your body, especially if there's a famine around. But we've been eating plants for thousands of years, because hunting and killing animals is hard, and they will kill you. But plants, they're harmless. They won't kill you. Well, they're doing more damage than animals have ever done to us, because the plants, again, they've got mechanisms to control and kill you, where the animals that we hunt and kill have horns and thorns, and some of them have poisons, but most of them are not poisonous, but plants are. So the propaganda is so powerful and so long that the story we give is really hard to believe, because just like our religions, our politics, our cultures, you're not going to tell me to change. And it's actually built into our brain to be resistant to change. That we're like, no, I don't believe you, because you're telling me a lie, and I'm not going to go down that road. And so if before you're born, and actually in utero, you've become addicted to plants, because plant chemicals, heroin, cocaine, marijuana, nicotine, caffeine, are consumed by your mother and her mother and her mother and her mother and her mother, and the dads too, because they affect the epigenetic expression of your DNA. And so the genes are changed. Just like viruses, bacteria, and yeast will implant their DNA into your DNA, plants are doing the same thing. And it's passed on to generation and generation and generation. But we've heard the story so long that meat is bad and plants are good. Eat your fruits and vegetables, and stay away from red meat. And so, I don't fight anything. I'm just here to share a story. If you love it and want to try it, great. If not, that's okay too. Doesn't matter to me. And so I think it's like Sally Norton's a rock star, and her stuff is amazing. I believe, though, that oxalates are just one part of this story. Lectins, oxalates, phytates, all the glycoproteins and the lipoproteins that come from other organisms are antigenic to us. That's why we get a tremendous amount of hay fever and upper respiratory problems. But when you eat plants, it's mostly fiber, and fiber doesn't digest very well in our gut. And so the bugs love it. The microbes, bacteria, and yeast, they eat it. And when the microbes eat your sugars and the fiber, they make alcohol. So most of us are walking around with alcohol being produced in our gut, especially our young children. And that causes a lot of brain dysfunction, neurologic dysfunction. But then there's heat, methane gas, aldehydes, to name a few chemicals made in the digestive tract of human beings. That's damaging to the layer of the gut called the glycocalyx, the sugar layer, and then the microbes and all the other chemicals and antigens. They just work their way into your body. They set up shop, and they cause all the diseases we suffer from.
It's so funny you mentioned that, because in my head, as you were going through that, I was like, yeah, I remember, back in the day when I was eating probably 80 plus grams of fiber a day, I was the most bloated, gassiest person you would have ever met. My trainer hated me every time I'd squat. It just squeeze out because where's it gonna go? And it was a whole mess. And when I switched to predominantly animal-based high-fat diet, literally the first thing that changed for me, and you can attest to this too, is just no bloat, just like nice. I like for a while I was like, man, am I just like gaining weight or am I just bloated? But no, it's like flat belly, just no gas, just it's crazy, just the systemic change. And there's this sort of nomenclature around fiber, and I see these videos constantly online, especially, and they're targeting diabetes patients, of ingesting this sort of, I think it might be insoluble fiber, but I'm not quite sure, but it's a powder pack of fiber to take with meals, and it's just it's missing the mark, I should say. And it's just kind of hard to see, you know.
Well, science and medicine is resistant to change, even though you would think they were most interested in opposite ideas and new discoveries, but we're not, because it's propagated by the profiteers. And I'm not pointing any fingers, but it's all of us, by the way. In some way, we're taught something and we believe it, and then we just spread it around without ever stepping back and saying, well, you know what, is that really true? I always ask, is that really true? And for me, when my best friend Dave Kilmer from medical school died at age 52, and my sister Marianne died at age 52 of diabetes, and she had it since age 4, something was up that I didn't understand. Because the question is, glucose is important in our body, correct?
That's what we're told. Yes.
Right. But the question is, what is it for? What's glucose's, what's its function?
What they'll tell you is that your brain cannot function without it. And that's sort of the overarching thing that I'll hear from people. But they'll say it's your energy, energy.
They say it's your energy. And you're right. They say your brain cannot live without it. Actually, your body cannot live without glucose. You will die. But it's never required to come from a plant. When you eat meat contains sugar, but small amounts. And in actuality, the only energy for the mitochondria comes from fat. It never comes directly from glucose. You must convert glucose to fat in the liver via insulin, or you die. Type 1 diabetics die of that, and liver failure patients die of that. But ultimately, if we really step back and understand, well, does it make sense that you burn sugar 1 minute and then you burn fat the next? It's like you breathe air or you breathe water. Does that make any sense?
No.
Fat is always circulating in your bloodstream, always. It crosses the blood-brain barrier and every barrier of your body, because if you can't pass fat into your cell, you die. Sugars are also easily moved all around your body, but sugars are in order to glycosylate your proteins, because without sugars that binds to a protein, you cannot have the proper function of that protein. And so most people don't know that sugars are attached to almost all proteins. And the lipoproteins, the LDL, the HDL, the VLDL, and the chylomicrons also have sugars attached to them in order to function properly in our body. So glucose is critical, but so is mannose, fucose, N-acetylglucosamine, N-acetylgalactosamine, uramic acid, sialic acid. But have you heard of these sugars?
Oh, no one talks about those.
Nobody does. So nobody also talks about the importance of glycosylation. So glycosylation is the normal binding of sugar onto its proper substance, like either lipids, fats, or even other sugars, where glycation is the rusting, the excessive addition of sugars that causes the damage to the cells and the molecules within our body. That's what we're really suffering from.
You know, I'm really glad you brought up earlier mitochondria too, because when we think of fertility and childbearing as well, it's like we have the mother passing on these mitochondrial genetics as well. I mean, pretty much entirely. So when you think about the population being as metabolically unfit as it is, and we're passing these on, each generation we're seeing sort of just an escalation of these problems, combined with these environmental factors and sort of like propagated like thoughts around how we should be eating. And so I like that you bring a multifactorial view, like even when we look at things like sugar is energy, because there's so much going on that you can't look at it from a myopic point of view of
Yeah.
A equals B, because everything's doing everything all the time.
At the speed of light. See,
Yeah.
people don't understand, like my neurotransmitters that are helping me see, hear, speak, get a sense of the world while I'm doing this, they're moving so fast, you and I can't even understand it. These are neurotransmitters, and cell mechanisms, including the motion of a muscle, requires glycosylation, which again, proteins are being made, they're being sugars are being added, they're being moved around, they're being transmitted around your body, and it's like a pot of soup, right? It's not like the molecules over in one side of the pot say, wait a minute, we got to go over here to do this and over here to do that. It's happening like in so amazing ways, so fast. And if you have never seen sort of a 3 or 4 dimensional structure of a nanomotor, these molecular nanomotors, so the amino acids come together to make a protein, the sugars, and there's other post-translational modifications to proteins that are critical: sulfation, phosphorylation, ubiquination, just to name a few things that and probably even more than that are happening, that we are kind of focused on, like glucose is your energy. And then we talk about the Randall cycle, the Krebs cycle. I think we've got it all wrong. And essentially, if you're too skinny, meaning you don't have enough adipose, you cannot reproduce. And
True.
you're at high risk of just dropping dead. Obesity doesn't cause disease. The food you eat gets you fat, and it also gets you sick, because you're basically eating sugar and the plant chemicals and antigens and the fermentation that actually is the cause of almost all disease. That's why fatty meat, salt water is like the most amazing elimination diet you can do. Make you feel better in like a week. There's a little bit of withdrawal, but go ahead.
No, it's actually quite remarkable how fast people can have turnarounds, especially with things like people with years of like sleep issues or energy issues or even joint pain. I've spoken to people where after a week of me helping them out, it's sort of like, okay, cool. It's like, I don't even know where we go now because you're feeling so good.
Even if you're 400 to 500 pounds, it takes but a week, 2 or 3, maybe 4, to suddenly go like, you're looking around like, I feel great now. I just want to eat fatty meat and I'm happy and I don't need you anymore. And again, we are built to get fat fast, because if you don't get fat fast on the small amount of food you might find out in the wilderness, you're dead. And so the majority of the food you eat, since people don't eat fat, all goes to the liver. Amino acids and sugars go to the liver. Via insulin, they're converted to fat in the liver. Then the lipoproteins, I should say the glycolipoproteins, then deliver that package of amino acids, sugars, and fatty acids and cholesterol, along with the minerals and vitamins, in the form of HDL, LDL, VLDL, and chylomicrons. I call them the Amazon delivery service of the body. And so, like LDL causes heart disease. No, it doesn't. Glycation causes heart disease.
Yeah.
And glycation damages your lipoproteins, which then embed in your vessels. And we blame the lipoproteins, but it's still plant sugars, and that's all it is.
And I'll even add on to that LDL conversation very briefly. We talked to Sean Baker quite a bit about that with the Nick Norwitz Oreo study that he was doing with lowering LDL and stuff. But I found it so fascinating. So my dad won't mind me calling him out because I do quite often. But he recently had a CAC score and was in the 93rd percentile of his age bracket at 60 years old, and has had a lifelong controlled LDL. And so I basically told him that he disproved the LDL hypothesis by himself. Now, I didn't say that to make him feel bad, but I used it to open his mind. And it's been pretty remarkable to see his transformation by changing that simple mindset of seeing the data for himself with his own body.
We
I can
should
see you
not
thinking.
even, there's no reason to draw cholesterol, HDL, or LDL. It has no value.
Yeah.
Even triglycerides, no value. And I just believe we're still down the wrong rabbit hole. Personally, I think ultimately, I have a CAC score of 700. Okay.
Okay.
I have a CT angiogram, which basically says I have a little bit of narrowing to my circumflex, but everything else looks great. I have calcium deposits everywhere, oxalates, lectins,
That's a big one.
phytates, all of that. I've been eating spinach for like years. I love spinach and salad and all the vegetables, green vegetables. Oh my God. And ultimately we're all going to die. We have not proven that carnivore means you're going to live longer. I don't know, but I can tell you I've never felt better on this diet. It's amazing.
I will say this. I mean, when people talk about longevity, I always kind of smirk at some of the conversation, because when you look at historical data of like people living, if you live to a certain age historically, you lived a damn long time. And so to think, I mean, some of our founding fathers were pretty old gentlemen towards the end of their life. And we're not living particularly longer as far as the total length of time. We may have more people living there, but we're also living there sicker and on more medication. So you got to keep those variables in mind. When it comes to the fertility conversation, just because I know this is your bread and butter, we don't have that conversation on here as much. When you're working with a couple that's trying to conceive, one thing that has come into my mind over the last couple of years, as I've gotten up there in my 20s, think about having kids in the future, things like that, is setting up that biology for building a healthy child. Because I think that, I think people think that they're doing good. Then I don't want to say they're not. But I'd love to hear your view of how you work with someone through that system so that they have the best shot. And then we can kind of talk about some of the postnatal care as well, because I find that interesting.
Well, let's just say that the increase in fertility issues is happening both on the male and female side all over the globe. Okay. And the cause is secondary, I believe, to a plant-based low animal fat diet. If you simply add animal fat significantly, eat less frequently, cook the plants well, you'll help improve that. But at all ages, we should be talking about that. But in general, in the earlier years, the teens and early 20s, no one's listening.
It's true. It's true.
What do
It's true.
You're partying, you're hanging out with your buds, because that's the nature of it. Okay. Unfortunately, many people will damage themselves to a point and may not be any return of their eggs, a sperm, or other organ systems, because all the diseases that damage your reproductive organ system happens at a young age. So many young women, young girls, PCOS, PMS, endometriosis, endometritis, salpingitis. Surgeries are happening younger and younger. And on the male side, these similar things, that the pelvic damage and then the sperm damage, the testosterone lowering effects, I think, are on the rise. So, my job here is I'm here to share these stories to everybody. And the younger you are, so if I can get the parents that are trying to get pregnant and or not pregnant, to begin to listen and learn and understand that, I call it the baby's diet. I kind of show this.
Yeah.
This is my craziness. Bacon, eggs, butter, beef. Yes, ice cream from time to time, and salt is like, I call it the baby's diet. I just had a 42-year young woman. She's been trying for a number of years. Everything looks perfect, including her embryos are amazing, but she hasn't gone keto or carnivore yet. So I spend time just talking about it to all of us. And so, interesting enough, the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology recommends red wine and a plant-based diet to pregnant and lactating women. Does that make any sense?
No.
No. And essentially, we need to be open to this, but I think everyone should look towards a keto or carnivore diet, which is, again, high fat. I personally think eating less frequently. We're not grazing animals. We're more like carnivore animals. I recommend one meal a day or less. But, one meal, 1 or 2 snacks, okay, I'll give you that. But the more you feed the bowels, the more you risk damage to the body. And a high protein diet is deadly for us. So that's why lean meats like chicken and turkey and fish, I don't recommend at all. I recommend ruminant meats, lamb, goats, and beef are the very best in my opinion. And the more, again, more fat focused, the healthier you are, because the adipose tissue contains all the minerals, vitamins, and building blocks of your body and your baby. And if you look at hibernating bears, they lose adipose tissue, they build baby bears in utero, and they lose no muscle mass and no bone mass. So we've got it wrong that adipose tissue is this terrible thing. Nope, nope, nope. It is amazing. So the more we can, and again, that's why I do this online, because social media is the new social medicine. It is the way to connect with everyone around the world in ways people go like, this guy's crazy. Wait a minute, you got pregnant with that diet? I mean, people call me, my friend got pregnant on your dumb diet, and she never even called you. And again, it's pretty radical. It's not mine either, by the way. I didn't make it up. I've learned from so many people that have been doing this for thousands and thousands of years.
If you're a health conscious food consumer who's also very active, you know how big of a struggle it is to find a bar that is both convenient and nutrient dense. That's why I was so excited when I discovered the Alpa Bar. The Alpa Bar is a meat based bar that contains only simple ingredients: 100% grass fed beef, tallow, and honey, and is both nutrient dense and convenient, and packs a caloric punch of over 300 calories. For me, this was a game changer and is now the go to snack and fuel source I use when I'm hiking, camping, hunting, skiing, or doing anything in the outdoors and I don't have the resources to cook a full meal. The Alpa Bar is made proudly in Colorado and only uses locally sourced meat. JJ and Rob are also extremely based and accept Bitcoin for payment. I highly recommend you check out the Alpa Bar for any time you need a nutrient dense and convenient snack on the go. Check them out at eatalpa.com and use code DRadio5 at checkout to get a 5% discount. And if you pay in Bitcoin, you can get an additional discount on top of that. That's eataupa.com and use code DRadio5 at checkout.
And that's the beautiful part of it, is like none of this is necessarily new information. I mean, some of the science and understanding may be newer to us, but fundamentally we've been doing this since the advent of us being here on the planet. So it's really like returning that. And we talked to Rob Wolf about various things. As you mentioned paleo earlier, I just sort of jogged my memory of having him on talking about paleo for a while. But that's why I love these things, because fundamentally, when you really get to the bare bones, if you're talking to your neighbor or whatever, health is simple. And we tend to overcomplicate it with our cute little brain between our ears. And we just need to remove the noise. And I think that goes beyond just food, but just everything in our life. We could all do with some less noise and a little more self-reflection and contemplation. And yes, exactly. I love it.
We're hunters.
Yeah.
We're not grazers. We came out of the trees to eat the grass eaters, not the grass. But hunting cows, cattle is hard. I mean, lions get killed all the time by buffalo. And so we are like, whoa, wait a minute. They're eating grass over there and they're doing okay. But in fact, we likely did not eat grass and grains until we figured out how to grind and cook, because and soak and other things. I mean, maybe fruit, you were able to do some fruit, but if you just ate fruit, you would not be a healthy person.
No, and even look around. Like, I often tell people, I'm in Salt Lake, Utah, so up in the mountains, and I say, look around. What could you really forage? And I've actually gone foraging with some friends, and we do it for fun. But you don't really find a survivable amount of food foraging, especially in the desert. So you really need to fundamentally think, like, where would we be getting the most nutrient dense amount of calories as well? That's going to be coming from meat and fat. On the animals that we hunt. And it simply makes sense. One thing that I found really helpful too with this sort of a lesser discussed side of carnivore and keto is that by going on a diet like that, you're also lowering the amount of pesticides you're getting, like dramatically. You're also lowering the amount of deuterium that you're getting. And these are just sort of some subtle side parts to those things.
Huge.
But they're huge for your mitochondria because we're just bombarded today on a level that we haven't been before with our environment. And if you just simply kind of moved it that way, that's why I think so many people can make so much gain with such a simple change and not really changing their entire life and moving out into the middle of the woods, which still would be great. But it's pretty astounding. One thing I sort of wanted, unless you had something to add on to that really quickly, I wanted to sort of talk about the idea of fasting, because you sort of brought that up a minute ago. And there's sort of this like one camp over here, and then there's camp on this side that's super again. And we've seen this shift over the last several years where fasting became very popular, still is to a degree. And then there was this huge shunning of fasting I've seen within the last like year or two, especially around things like OMAD or like women fasting particularly. How do you view fasting as a whole? Because I think we'd be doing it. Like, it's happening. Like, we should be doing it. It's definitely a thing. But where do you view it on the scale of it being a helpful stressor versus a over the top? Or is there an over the top?
Well, fasting allows the gastrointestinal tract to empty. You got to do at least 3 days in order to do that, by the way. Then it allows the glycobiome, the glycocalyx, the sugar layer, to heal in order to prevent the leaky gut. Because leaky gut is secondary to loss of there's a plant layer on every cell structure of our body, which are the defense mechanisms, and they're the barcode of the plants. The sugars that actually bind to the glycocalyx, they support the glycocalyx from being eroded. Okay. And so by fasting, you allow the regrowth in the gut, because the gut is the most damaged part of our body, if you think about it. And if it's damaged, all the microbes, the macrobes, the antigens get into our bloodstream, and they go around and they take you down. And so if you have a strong glycocalyx, and it's everywhere, but in the gut particularly, and fasting, I believe, helps heal that. But fasting is hard because it's meant to be hard, in the sense of, like, if thousands of years ago you had a bunch of food available, your job was to eat it in order to get fat to survive the time while you're searching for food, right? Or you're migrating or immigrating or gestating or hibernating, right? So all those things are natural. So the idea that there's food around and you should not eat it is not what your brain was used to, because what food lasts long in nature without being degraded by decomposition or other carnivores or herbivores or animals that are out there to eat that food, right? And the scavengers, again, you got to fight for the food, so you better eat fast and get it down. So fasting is not natural. It's more a little bit because you didn't have food more than anything, right? Or maybe you had a limited amount and you knew it had to last, so you maybe rationed it over time and you didn't graze on it, right? We have a GI tract like a lion, not like a sheep, by the way. And so I believe that fasting is hard, just like a marathon or exercise every day is hard, but hard is the very best thing you could do in life. And I also think that it's very spiritual. And I believe that faith in God and spirituality is critical for humanity, for us to help us live a better life, feel better in life, and connect with our highest power. So solitude, loneliness, spirituality, and fasting, I think is really good because it's hard.
No, and I totally agree. It goes back to sort of that evolutionary discussion that we had. It's not that we would choose to do it if we didn't. In fact, I mean, I watch animals all the time. They scarf anything. It's because they know they're trying to survive. It's our brain getting in the way of thinking about how, I mean, you'd rationally not have, you'd have days without food and you'd be dying.
all the time. And so as long as your gastrointestinal tract is full of food, and what do most people eat? They eat fruits, vegetables, seeds, nuts, lean meat. They don't eat fat. That's the majority. And they're eating 3 to 6 meals a day. And remember, the majority of processed food actually is made from plants. Okay.
Yes.
So now the plants and the fiber take days to digest. Now, since the day you're born to the day you die, you've been consuming these things 3 times a day or more in many ways. So is your gastrointestinal tract ever empty?
Rarely.
Never.
If ever.
Never, really. And so that means 24/7, 365, from the day you're born to the day you die, you're secreting the plant products into the from the gastrointestinal tract into the liver through the hepatic portal stream. So sugars and amino acids are both fermentable, and they're both mostly sugars.
Mm-hmm.
So what increases insulin? Amino acids and sugars. Now, is insulin bad for us?
No.
No. Your body makes insulin. It makes insulin for a reason. It's not to put sugars in the cell. It's actually to make fat.
Yes, correct. Yeah.
That's all it is. All right. Insulin's job is to make fat.
Yep.
The liver's job is to make fat. And that's the simple answer, because that's the majority of what it does. All right. And so if you realize that our diets, like if you just even ate your standard diet, but you ate only once a day or once every 2 days, and you're trying to lose weight, so eat 3 meals a day and go jogging? Why don't you just eat 1 meal a day or less, and you don't have to jog?
Yeah, it's pretty dramatic, and it's very interesting because it sort of harkens me back to eating disorder recovery days, where they basically were like, yeah, eat 6 times a day, and it's sort of different in certain scenarios when they're trying to just stuff you like a turkey, basically, but it's just the wrong way to go about it, especially if you want to come out of it the other side with that vitality, because in a lot of cases you're building back a worse body in a lot of ways, and so you kind of have it's very controversial, but I think you have to have a different mindset around it. Anything being entirely black and white, because I have the same gripe when people talk about cortisol as being this like horrible hormone when it's vital for us to even wake up. And there needs to be less just like red washing all these things and more actual discussion around, okay, what is it doing? I mean, insulin becomes bad when we treat it inappropriately. When we treat it with the way our biology is meant to function, it's pretty much our hero. So we need to view that in that lens, and I think you would agree.
Well, I was talking to a patient works in the nurse in the neonatal unit, and these babies are born and they become hypoglycemic, low glucose. So what do? They pump them with IVs of glucose. Okay. Now the mom was eating a high sugar diet, so her insulin's up. The baby's used to the high insulin, the high sugars. The baby's born because the sugars have been removed because they're not getting the blood sugar anymore. And so their insulin is currently high. So they drop their glucose levels. But we're giving each other IV glucose, which is deadly to be given. So we should give
straight.
Oh, it's bad. And we should be given IV fats if you can't eat. Intravenous fat is what we should be focusing on if we're trying to heal so many people that are sick, because we don't give them fat. I mean, in fact, if you're overweight and sick, eat fat. You will feel better, reduce inflammation, and you're going to lose weight because your satiety, you're no longer hungry. That's the craziness of the story.
Are you looking to get the benefits of grounding and earthing, but really just can't be barefoot all the time? Yes, you know what I'm talking about, right? Absorbing free electrons from the earth, improving your circadian rhythm and blood flow and vitality and redox. And that is why I'm excited that this show is brought to you by Rizal Shoes. Rizal Shoes are, in my awareness, the only non-sandal grounded shoes. They have slip-ons and they have cool boots as well with laces that are not only grounded via a copper plug, but have leather outsoles made with water buffalo hide. So they're all natural. They are grounded and they're barefoot and minimalist with a wide toe box. This is imperative for foot health, and it's really going to keep you connected in a modern lifestyle setting so you don't have to walk around barefoot all the time. I love them in the winter time. I can wear socks with my slip-ons and not be freezing cold trying to be grounding. You need to check them out, folks. Rizal Shoes, RHIZAL.co. Rizal.co is their website. Use code DRadio at checkout for 10% off and get your shoes, get grounded, get connected, and improve your health.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about obesity in general, I think about energy insufficiency rather than energy excess in a lot of ways. I mean, you've turned a well-oiled machine into one that's less well-oiled. But I do agree with you for sure that I think in some senses that's in some ways a better position to be evolutionarily than being way underweight, because you're basically running on fumes at that point.
And we likely survived infinite famines, wars, pestilence, disease. And how many pregnant women were running around the savannah? They were likely in a cave and protected and not eating very much for probably months. Many animals hibernate, or they nest where they're not eating for a long time.
No, I totally agree. And it's actually really interesting because if we look at the normalization of a lot of the chronic illnesses we're seeing today, and it's not so much, and when we talk about things, especially when it's from a fertility point of view, like endometriosis, just like I know more and more people with this condition, and there's sort of this normalization of, oh, we're just catching it now more than we were catching it before. And it's, I think about biologically, if we were not catching this, we would not survive as a species, because if we were in this much pain, how would we be able to move around to dodge that tiger or go hunting or do any of the things we did to get where we are? And so we sort of need to remove the stigma of normalization, and it's okay to do that.
Yeah, and think about it. We were having children in the early teens for women for infinite years. And so our postponement of childbearing is a big issue. And then with that comes many of the exposures of other toxins, microbes that cause a lot of disease and early death and affect our fertility issues for sure. And plus, we're not living in small clans. We're living in large cities. And so in a large city or large gatherings, you're at risk of getting more diseases that are infectious in origin. And that's part of our other problem. I mean, we can't go back to the savannah, but here we are in large gatherings. And even if you go hang out in a large gathering, you're going to catch something. It's just the way it is, because especially with new and different people, because the microbes and the plants absolutely control the universe.
No, I mean they've been here way longer than us. So it makes a lot of sense. They're not dumb. They're very, very smart. Actually, that was one thing that sort of piqued my interest. Is one thing I've noticed, like you said, people are having children also on top of all these things at older and older ages, or trying to conceive, and that brings around a whole nother realm of challenges. How do you approach that? Because I'm sure you get a lot of those, because all my cousins, all of them, married early 30s, waited years, late 30s, trying to have children, or even later.
Well, each generation's waiting a little bit longer. In general, we've got to be ready to have a child. We got to have money in the bank and a house. I mean, for the last 3.5 million years, what animal or human being pre-civilization was saying, well, we can't do it yet. We got to wait, right? So the drive is to have sex. The drive is to reproduce. The drive is really that. And so, nowadays we talk a lot about that. I encourage people to think about having children younger, or bank your eggs, sperm, or embryos younger, or maybe you can take care of your body in a different, more improved way. If we can help more and more people, I think, look at the keto carnivore world. Again, I say keto carnivore. We want to bring everyone into this. Even
Yeah.
vegan, vegetarians, Mediterraneans, pescatarians can be part of this if you learn some new ways that may be helpful to reduce the toxicity of the current standard diets that we're all consuming.
Yeah, because it's a good point because just simply the longer you're here, the more accumulation of things you have. And actually, that's another benefit of having some adipose in a way, because if you aren't paying attention to these things, where does all this stuff get stored? A lot of it gets stored in adipose, like heavy metals and various things like that. So if you're a skinny buck, you're just having it shoot all around. And that was my experience.
Well, I do not believe we store toxins in our adipose tissue. I think we're wrong on that one.
Okay. No, I'd love to hear.
No, I'm just telling you something that like again, your body wants to eliminate toxins, correct?
Mhm.
Your body doesn't want to store any toxins, and actually, the toxins are going to disable you and kill you in general, right? They're not,
Correct.
the toxins aren't there. So, let's store them in the fat. Why would it do that? There's no reason, right? The body is just a magical miracle machine, and ultimately, if you're eating a toxin, it's going to take you down, or it's going to cause you to be sick. So your body's working to eliminate all this stuff as best it can. That's what the immune system is doing. Adipose tissue is the storage of all of the fuels and all of the building blocks of your body, all of them, minerals, vitamins, again, the amino acids, sugars, and the fatty acids are stored in your adipose tissue, and your lymphatics draw them away from there and deliver them everywhere in your body. So maybe you could live another day and you could be alive. This idea that adipose tissue is just waiting for what? I don't know. It is
Metabolically active. So yeah.
And our mitochondria, I think the mitochondria is just another important part of our body. What about the endoplasmic reticulum? What about the Golgi apparatus, right? What about the cell walls of every cell of our body? Which one's more important than another? I don't think anyone is lacking ATP. We're not lacking ATP. Adenosine triphosphate is abundant in your body. As long as your heart's beating, you're making ATP, and you've got some stored around there. And that's not our problem. We're simply damaging the mechanisms of our body that are critical for our normal function, survival, and longevity potentially by proteins and plants.
That I totally agree with. And that's why we see a lot of these. I hear the stigma all the time. Just around the dinner table where it's like, oh, it was like, hey, getting old, blah, blah, blah. And it's because they've had this accumulation over long periods of time, their systems breaking down. But it's not like a necessary thing that has to happen. So I like to break the absolutes, because we sort of grow up in a society where it's like each decade has a certain vibe to it. And at some point it tends to break down, and we're all breaking down all the time. But some of us are breaking it down faster.
Well, there are many things you don't see that are breaking you down.
Right.
Just standing, again, everything is in motion, and there are infinite particles that are infinitely small, that are going right through you, that are causing some form of glycation, oxidation, damage to your body. Just put a car in a garage for 100 years, and does it look brand new when it comes out?
No,
nothing does. And so, we are not built, again, are we going to live 150 years? Doubt it. Again, do I want to live 150 years? I don't care. I love living every day, and I have no idea when I'm going to die, how I'm going to die, and I don't care how I'm going to die. I want to make myself the very best fertilizer for that plant that's going to use me as its energy.
Mm-hmm. No, I love it. It's a cyclical nature. Everything's a cycle. And that's one thing I love about, I think that you brought this up earlier, and I sort of forgot it for a moment, but I talked about this with Terry Walls when I had her on the show, and you were talking about the importance of having spiritual nature and
Oh, yeah.
having purpose.
Oh,
And I feel like there's such a lack of that. And so as we go into the tail end of this episode, I'd love to sort of break into this section, because there's such a lack of, I feel like there's an identity crisis in society. And so a big part of that is a sense of purpose, and spiritual, nature can be within that. I'd love to hear your philosophy around this, because you talk about optimism a lot, and I love that. And I think there's a lot there to be discussed.
So one thing, Terry Wales is one of my heroes. I learned from her years ago about paleo, and sort of was on the stepping stones of all of that. If you imagine us thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago, we honored the sun god, the earth gods. Okay, human beings are naturally believers in the outer powers of the universe, right? In essence, the spiritual connection to the gods, which are actually within all of us and all entities of the universe. But I think that faith, see, I always say faith is more important than your diet all day long, right? You have to have faith in God. You have to believe in God. You have to see God in all things and know the magic of God is always working in your favor, always. So the worst things that you might have called yesterday become the best things of your today and tomorrow, right? And so I think it's really important. I always quote the Stoics, Marcus Aurelius, Wayne Dyer, so many people. I read biblical texts, Christian, Muslim, Jewish, Hindu. All of these things are part of us because it's our journey of evolution of human beings on this earth. That we are spiritual beings first. And what you think is vibrational energy to every cell molecule of your body, but it also radiates throughout the universe, and it speaks to the heavens.
No, I couldn't agree more. And actually, that's one of the things that we could talk about Bruce Lipton for 2 seconds, because he's a big proponent of like thought and disease manifestation.
Oh, yeah.
But I believe for sure that if you do not think you can get better, you will not get better.
All it is.
And it's that simple.
Yeah. So as you think, so shall it be. I mean, one of my heroes is Wim Hof. And Wim is the master of the mind. He's a vegetarian, vegan, and he's mighty at the mission. It doesn't matter your diet. I will tell you this, all right? If you really foster the mindset, does it take work? Sure it does. But what in life that is good and great came easy?
For sure.
Nothing.
Totally agree.
Nothing.
Do you have any favorite mindset like works that you do? I know Wim Hof is a very popular like breathing. I love just like going out and working on like diaphragmatic breathing just throughout the day in between, just to sort of reconnect with things around me. I'd love to hear if you have a particular routine you're a fan of.
Well, I do painting and pottery and writing, and I play my guitar, and I just do nothing some days. But I always say the gratitude is the number one thing in life that'll take you everywhere and anywhere. Thank you, God, Lord, for this day. Go down the list of gratitude to everything ever in your life. Anything you chastise negatively will harm you. And remember, God is the creator of everything. God is always working in your favor. And so if you're judging anything that's ever happened to you, and like, God, why are you doing this to me? And God simply says, because I love you. That's all it is. And so I do a little bit of weights and some bike riding and things like that, but I love to get in my pottery studio and painting. But I love to listen to people like yourself and others on these conversations, because I'm in the studio, but I'm listening and watching the people, and we're learning together. And it really is as simple as thank you, God, Lord, creator, for the day. I appreciate you.
I love it. I mean, I think that one of the greatest, most mind-bending things I ever heard from a friend of mine was that meditation can be what you want it to be. It doesn't need to be this, you sit and breathe, because I think a lot of people get that stopgap there. And like you mentioned playing guitar, some of the most meditative sessions I've ever had were playing guitar, and it can be whatever you want.
Can you imagine sitting and not breathing?
It would be very difficult.
It'd be very difficult
after a few minutes.
But it is true if you focus on something. But I do not believe that meditation is clearing of the mind. It's a focused mind. This is one of the most important things I think we're missing. I'm going to clear all the clutter. Well, if you imagine the clutter is there for your good favor, and you could be grateful for the clutter, grateful for everything ever in your life, but what you're doing is you're cleaning it up and you're focusing on the thing that you want. But most people sort of go like, God, please give me this, or why'd you do this to me? But it really is, thank you, God, for everything in my life.
I think it's as simple as that. Where can people find you and reach out to your clinic, all these things? I mean, I got all the links already in the description, but I thought I'd give you the floor for the last minute of the show here.
Listen, Ryan, I have really enjoyed this, and these conversations are important. And I'm not here to argue with anyone. You know, I'm like all for whatever you want to do in life and believe in life. But I think the more things that we're sharing about what we've been talking about is really rock star. So again, grateful. But drkiltz.com or cnyfertility.com, or that's all you need. I'm kind of like, I love putting it out there and sharing together and learning together. And I love to go to retreats. But if you come into some of the carnivore events, the keto events, I'm there. Come by, ask me questions. Tell me I don't know what I'm talking about, and I'll say, yes, you're right.
Well, I appreciate you. And thanks everybody for tuning in to another episode of Decentralized Radio. We'll catch you in the next one.